Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome on to Alyx's World, a safe space for wrestling fans like you. You've seen her face on Fightful Select. You've seen her face on Wrestling Observer. You might have seen her face in some WWE specials. She's an American television personality, social media influencer, YouTube content creator, a podcaster, and even a live ring announcer. This girl does it all. Denise Hollywood Salcedo.
I
What's going
gotta tell you,
on?
your intro literally just gave me like so much. I don't know, you made me sound better than what I make myself sound like. So thank you so much for that incredible introduction. I was like, yes, that's me. Thank you.
How are you feeling today?
I'm doing good. I'm up. I'm ready to get the day started. I love Thursdays. Thursdays are my easier, lighter days. It's kind of the days where I can catch up on things. So I feel pretty good today.
I gotta give you your flowers. This month of September has been huge for you. I just saw your tweet where you said in the last 28 days, you have gotten 2 million views, over 5,000 plus new subscribers. That's just on YouTube. On TikTok, 1.1 million views and 2,000 followers. IG, 800. How does this make you feel? This is huge.
So for Instagram, that 200K was like reach. So basically, it's like how many more accounts you're like reaching, right? And more
Yeah.
people like, getting to view your stuff, which was huge, which by the way, that has now gone up to like nearly like 350K. So I'm like, thank God, because prior to this, like my Instagram was like dead. It was so dry. Like there was nothing going on there. And basically, like I've been so happy because I have like all of these goals and things that I've been wanting to do with the YouTube and the TikTok and just, everything. And obviously as a content creator, like there is like all the stuff you can maintain for the week, things that you can do. But then there's other things where you're like, okay, I know these things will drive more to my channel, but dang it, I just don't have the time. I'm trying to find the time. How can I go about this? And, you have all of these ideas in your head, but it's until you start executing them that, you really start to see these like rewards, I guess you can say.
Right.
And so I've just been really happy because there's times where you lose faith, you're like, oh my God, I'm doing all of this and everything's the same and nothing's changing. And, you feel like you're just going steady, but then something happens and all of a sudden you just feel like, yes, finally, hope.
It was all worth it. Getting into the first question here, you are an inspiration to a lot of people in terms of like content creators, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, but we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. I'm pretty sure you've had your struggles. But that being said, you are a noteworthy presence here in the wrestling media space. I want to know what that feels like from your perspective.
It's always so crazy to me when I hear people say that because I literally like came from nothing, had nothing, knew nobody, had no idea how to get into this business, didn't think there was going to be a place for me whatsoever. And so whenever I hear that to myself, I'm just like, oh my God, like this is how, because you never know how people perceive you or what people think of you until they tell you, right? Like when you live, here's the thing, like I know people think like, oh, if you have a bunch of followers and your videos are getting all of these views and all of these likes, this person's probably super popular and they're hanging out with their friends all the time. And oh my gosh, she lives in Hollywood. She must be having like this super glamorous life. But that's not the case. Like this is a very lonely job in the sense that I really only talk to people whenever I have like podcast stuff or whatever. I'm interviewing people. But for the most part, it's a lot of what you're seeing this, except I'm like editing, I'm writing, I'm thinking, brainstorming, researching, all of that stuff. So it can be a very lonely job. And I think that anytime I hear people say that, it's like, oh my God, I can't like even register it. I've had little moments where people do things or say things where I feel like, oh my God, people are finally like realizing and noticing my work, because for so long I felt like I was working and no one was seeing anything. I like saying or doing anything. Like I felt like so much of my stuff was going unnoticed. And then it really wasn't until like the last year where I finally started to feel like, oh my God, people are actually noticing me. So it makes me feel very, very happy. Like I don't think words will ever be able to describe that. And I'm just trying to find ways to keep that going.
Right. Was it always your dream to be like a television media personality since you were a kid?
No. So when I was a kid, I wanted to be an actress, and that was like my thing. Like I wanted to be the next Nicole Kidman. That was literally what I wanted to do. And I didn't actually start pursuing broadcasting until I went to college and realized I hated acting and that it wasn't for me. And I hated all the people involved in it. And I hated the entire world. I hated my school.
Wow.
I didn't hate my school per se, but I hated
Yeah.
the courses, right? For the
Mm.
acting class. I didn't like my teachers. I didn't like the people in it. Everybody was just so self-obsessed, and it was a lot
Mm.
of like bullying and mean and harsh things that people say to other people, and I didn't like that. I didn't fit in that world, and I didn't feel like I was thriving. And it was in a moment of like, what am I going to do next with my life, where I accidentally stumbled upon broadcasting. When I saw people do it at my school, I thought, what the hell is that? I want to do that. Like, that's the thing that I want to do. Because growing up, I really wasn't, even though I wanted to be an actress, I really wasn't somebody that sat at home and watched TV. Like, I had my little programs as a kid, but I was always a music person. Like, I spend my hours and my days, listening to music and writing. That was the passion. That was the thing. And so when I saw broadcasting, I thought, oh my God, that is so great. I still remember, like, I have this vision. I don't even know who this girl is, but there was this girl who was doing her job. She was the anchor. And I remember looking at her and thinking, I want to be that girl. And so that's when I basically made the change to pursue broadcasting. And it was finally the first time where I felt, you know what? I can do this. I'm good at this. And I finally started seeing like some like positive feedback. I was doing the best in my classes. I was the obnoxious kid, Alyx, the one that's thriving in the class that everybody hates. I was never that kid before.
Look at you now. Now that obnoxious kid is pretty much the face or a face of wrestling media. So speaking of wrestling, every personality wrestler has that one match they go back to and go, that's what made me a wrestling fan. What match was that for you?
My favorite, see, here's the thing, like I have a bunch of moments that made me a wrestling fan. It's just so much, like it's a lot of going with my uncle to the wrestling shows, going and like discovering wrestling and all of that stuff that I did. Waiting to meet the wrestlers when I was a kid, as dorky as it sounds.
Wow.
It's all of those moments. But if I were to say like a match, I always go back to my favorite match, which is the Samoa Joe Kenta Kobashi match that I feel like I always talk about. But that was really my favorite match that like I had never felt like I could go back and really rewatch a match over and over besides that match, because I don't rewatch matches. I know a lot of people do that. I don't do that. Like if I like a match, I watch it once and that's probably it. Like I won't go back and revisit it very often. Sometimes I will for like certain moments, but for the most part, I move on to the next thing. But that was one of the matches that I really, really love. But for me, in terms of like falling in love with wrestling, it was just a bunch of moments that culminated into one big giant bubble of moments.
So I guess a follow-up question would be, if you were to pick, let's say, 5 wrestlers that had an influence on you as a fan, who would be those top 5 wrestlers for you?
So in terms of influence, I would say the first and foremost was always Chris Jericho. Like he was my favorite wrestler growing up, but I think he was more of an influence to me, mainly because he was somebody that had multiple things going on. Like the first thing that attracted me to Jericho was his personality, right?
Mm-hmm.
How he is, we've all seen Jericho and all of the stuff that he does. I was very much attracted to that. Like I loved this like larger than life personality. And I just thought he was so cool. But what I really liked about him was that, he was doing music, he was doing all of these different stuff. And that to me was very appealing. So I feel like he had a huge influence on me. I feel like this list has to be different than my favorite wrestlers wrestlers list, because other people that influenced me was Alita. She was another one that influenced me. I had never seen such a cool woman like Lita in my entire life, and seeing her and just going out there and just being this like person that I'd never seen before, and how cool and edgy she was, and like the things that she was doing, I was so impressed by that. Like I just wanted to be that level of cool. Like that was something that really very much inspired me. I was inspired by a lot of what you would say the divas. I loved Mickie James. I loved Melina. I loved them because I was always drawn to girls that I felt this is going to sound really like weird, but I felt kind of looked like me, or I wanted to look like.
That's not weird at all, actually.
Because I didn't relate to Trish Stratus. Like, Trish Stratus was this beautiful blonde bombshell type of girl. And I'm like, I could never be that. But I saw women like Mickie James and Melina and Stephanie McMahon with like this gorgeous, like brown hair. And they were so smart and they were doing something so cool. And that's what I saw as more attainable as a young girl. Like, that's what I saw, something that I could possibly be when I grew up. And so I was inspired by like all of those girls, like their fashion, the way that they acted, the way that they behaved. Those were all things to me that I found pretty inspiring.
Let's talk about how you got on with Wrestling Observer. I think that's the first time I personally saw you. So how is it that you met, I'm assuming, Dave Meltzer and Brian Alvarez to get you on that platform?
So this is really funny. Okay. So growing up, I remember my uncle used to listen to Dave and Brian, right? And I never knew about wrestling podcasts. I didn't go on the internet very often or anything like that. And then I remember I met my boyfriend, who is now my husband. Yes, we've been together forever. And he would listen to them. He was on, he was on the board. He was a subscriber, and he was the one who like told me about them. He's like, oh, you really need to listen to Brian and Vinny. They're so funny, this and that, right? And I was like, okay, fine, like I'll listen. And I ended up loving it. It was the first podcast I ever listened to was Brian and Vinny. And then I started listening to Brian and Dave, and that was the first experience I ever got in podcasting ever. Wow. And it was just so cool. Like, I never thought that listening to somebody have a conversation would be so enjoyable, but whatever. So I listened to them for years, right? Yeah. And I like wasn't active. I was a fan, I would, comment here and there, little stuff like that. I was never on the board though, because I just wasn't that person to like make a profile and have a presence like that. That wasn't me. But my boyfriend, now husband, he was always on the board. He's still like subscribed now, but like he was more of an active member. And so then basically how this all happened, I remember meeting Brian and Dave at the New Japan show in Long Beach, one of the ones that they had in that pyramid building. And I was so nervous because, I'd listened to their podcast forever and I respected so much of what they do. And so I went up to them and I was like, hi, I'm Denise. Nice to meet you. How are you enjoying the show? Can we have a picture? That sort of thing. And it was just a very simple little interaction, whatever. Posted my picture, whatever. And I kept doing my work. I was, working on Sean Waltman's podcast, and doing a bunch of other different stuff, right? Starting my YouTube channel, etc. So I one day thought, you know what? I'm so desperate. I need a freaking job. I need money. I need a job. I need to get somewhere. So I messaged Brian actually, and I told him like, hey, like, is there any opportunities for me to like, work with you guys? And I gave him like a whole pitch of an email sort of thing. And then he forwarded me to Tony, who basically handles that stuff. And then Tony and I were talking for a bit, but things never really took off. So I like for a whole year, it was just a lot of like, this is who I am, blah, blah, blah. And then I just kind of never really heard back. Right. And then afterwards, like I kept doing the work. I kept doing interviews. I kept appearing on podcasts. I kept doing all of this stuff. And then one day, like one random day, Tony reaches out to me and he's like, hey, Denise, like, let's talk. And I'm like, what now? Like, you want to talk to me? No way. Like, what the hell? This is crazy. So Tony tells me, he's like, I'm so sorry that we went like a whole year without doing anything, blah, 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 that sort of thing. He's all, but hey, we want to do something with you. And we started talking and, we came up with the Speak Now Pro Wrestling show and doing commercials for Twitch and all of that. And it's funny that we're talking about this now because tomorrow is my 2-year anniversary with F4W. And it was one of those things that when I celebrated my first year anniversary, Tony messaged me and was like, I should have hired you a year sooner.
I'm happy for you, Denise. That's really,
Thank
really
you.
cool. Quizlemania. Whose concept was that? Was that someone else's or was that yours?
Oh, no, that definitely was not my concept. That was Wrestle Talks thing. Like, that's their thing that they've been doing for I don't know how long they've been doing. I think they started during the pandemic and they basically did this like brainchild type of thing. And they'd done like several by the time I was just like a guest. And then I did like a co-hosting spot. And, but yeah, that one was pretty interesting too, because a lot of people discovered me, on that show as well.
We can't go on before we talk about Fightful Select. So how is it that you and Mr. Sean Ross Sapp became a thing?
So it was funny because I was doing Sean Waltman's podcast during this time. And here's the thing. I was doing wrestling podcasting and I was, doing my interviews and stuff, but I wasn't like in tune with the who's who of the wrestling world. And I wasn't like, I just knew Dave and Bryan and that was really it. Like I didn't know anybody else or anything like that. I wasn't the person, believe it or not, I wasn't the person on Twitter. I didn't even have a Twitter account, or I had one, but I didn't use it, that sort of thing. Right. And I remember, I guess Sean posted that he was looking for a co-host for his Raw post show. And someone tagged me and they were like, hey, Denise, like you should apply for this. And I didn't know who Sean was at the time. I didn't know what Fightful was. I didn't know any of it, And I saw it and I thought, well, I need a job. So let me, reach out to Sean. And I reached out to him and I was like, hey, this is what I do. Here's my work. Here's my reel. Here's a glimpse at, my YouTube channel and all of this stuff that I sent over. And he was like, you're hired. It was on the spot type of hiring that was just so fast. And it's funny because I laugh at that now because I know that he does like a whole process now. But for me, it was like, you're hired. I later found out that Sean Waltman put in some really nice words for me to Sean, to the other Sean. And so I didn't know that. I actually didn't find that out until like months and months later. And so then Sean and I started working together. And I remember when we started working together, it was just like this whole new world that I had been introduced to because I wasn't familiar with this like internet wrestling world. I did not come from that. I was not that kind of, I was the fan that was a fan, but wasn't on the internet showing my fandom, that type of thing. And so I I met Sean and we just like hit it off. And then we started doing the Raw post shows. And I remember my first thought of Sean was, oh my God, thank God he's not a creep. That was my first thought. Thank God he's not a creep. And then we just became friends.
That's funny.
Because I didn't know what to expect, And so when I hopped onto the show, it was like the first time I met him. Our first show was the first time I met him. So it was just like, okay, let's do this. And then it blossomed.
He's a cool dude. Everyone loves him.
Yeah.
Well, everyone that I know. Who knows?
Yeah.
Look, you've had the privilege to interview many, many wrestlers. We're talking AEW, WWE, and NWA. You've been all over the place. What was the interview for you that made you realize, wow, I actually made it? I am actually someone that people know.
Oh my God, there was a few. I think for me, I will say the Kurt Angle interview. I think that was a very, very special interview for me because that one, I shot my shot, and I didn't think that I was going to get it. And when I did, and I thought, oh my God, Kurt Angle, like one of my favorite wrestlers freaking ever, said yes to doing an interview with me, like, what the hell is that, And so when we did this interview, and I've always been afraid, and this is going to sound silly, but I've always been afraid that because I'm a girl and because, I have this high pitched voice and I'm always so happy that people are not going to take me seriously. That's always been my fear, that people aren't going to take me seriously. So when I did this interview with Kurt and he took me seriously and he gave me so much respect in that interview, oh my God, like it was the most nicest thing that I think I could have. And so I really, really just loved that interview and it did so well. And, people loved it. It was great. Like that was the interview for me that it's one of my most favorite interviews ever. And like that one was really great. Also, when I interviewed Conan, I think that one was pretty interesting too, because that was the one where I think people saw, I don't know how to say it, but I think they saw a range. Like she's not just talking to the famous people that are doing something right now, or the famous people that are like, I don't know how to explain it, like the ones that you're always talking about. Conan is a little bit more special, in a different way, and he's did so much for Lucha Libre and there's just so much history there, right? And I don't think people knew that I had that range. And so when I did my interview with Conan, it was one of the best interviews in terms of like the best feedback for that interview. And it drove some of my newest like fan base for that interview. And I think people started to take me seriously, but in a different type of way seriously.
If I was to ask you your top 5 personal favorite interviews.
Off the top of my head, I would say in terms of quality, I would definitely put the Conan one there. I would put the Jake Atlas one up there because that one was really, really good. And then I would also put in there the Thunder Rosa interview that I did. People really loved that interview. The interview that I did with Ty Mello, that one was phenomenal as well. And I would say those ones because those ones were more of like serious conversations. And I think a lot of times, oh, and my Joey Janela interview, that one too, because I think a lot of times people think like, oh, Denise is so happy and she's always having a great grand old time. And, you know, she's funny on her shows and stuff like that, that they think that I can't do the serious stuff, or people think, oh, she's always at a 10. She's too much. So she can't do the serious interviews. I can do the serious interviews. And when I do them, I feel like they turn out pretty damn good. So
I do too.
yeah, I was really happy about those interviews. I would say are some of my personal favorites in terms of quality.
Please keep the interviews coming. They're awesome, Denise.
Thanks. I try, you know, it's a mission, man.
So as you know, the entire wrestling world has been flipped upside down with the new regime in WWE, Triple H, Nick Khan, Stephanie McMahon. When you first found out, what was your reaction to it all?
Dude, I mean, like, this has to go back to like the news of Vince McMahon and everything that broke surrounding, you know, the Wall Street Journal and the allegations and all of that. And the second that broke, I remember like my first tweet was like, this is bad. This is not going to end good. And I know a lot of people were like, no, like everything's going to be fine, this and that. And I'm like, guys, we don't live in this world anymore where you can just sweep things under the rug or things could go on under the radar now. We don't live in that world anymore. We live in a different world. This is not going to end well. And so I think when the second that broke, I knew that there was going to be changes made, and they were. So I wasn't like totally shocked. It was just, I mean, I was shocked in the initial aspect of it when the Vince McMahon stuff came out, because I was like, oh my God, like this is going down. You know, the retirement thing, I was like, oh my God, like I always thought when Vince McMahon was gone, it was going to be because he passed away, right? Not because of all of this other stuff. So when that happened, I was just like, oh my God, there's the change is happening. Like so many times people would have the conversation of, you know, who's going to take over after Vince and what's going to happen and this and that. Is the company going to be sold to Disney? Is NBC going to buy it out? You know, all of these different conversations surrounding it. And, you know, and Triple H was announced as creative, head of creative, and Stephanie as the chairwoman and co-CEO and all of that stuff. I thought like, okay, you know what? Things are changing. This could be a major shift in wrestling. And already we're starting to see elements of that shift in wrestling. So it is like, I feel like we're just in the beginning right now of what can really be, you know, the impact that it can really cause. We're still not seeing the impact of this like management change, I don't think.
Do you ever think we'll get back to a level of, let's say, ruthless aggression or attitude era where people are watching and talking? You know, them days where wrestling was like the end thing. It was the trend and not following trends. You get me?
Yeah. It's hard to say. I feel like we just looking at like the numbers, they feel like so like impossible to get to those places. And also because like I am like not in this wrestling bubble. I try not to be in the wrestling bubble. You know, I have friends that have so many other interests and do not know anything about wrestling. And they'll hear certain stories here and there. And by stories, I mean like the Vince McMahon stuff. They heard about that, right? They don't hear about all this other stuff. You know, that's just not a thing in their world. So sometimes I think like, no, I just feel like you either, I don't think it'll ever get to that point again. But I also don't want to say never, because I just feel that sounds like pretty sad.
Didn't SmackDown do its highest rating in the last 2 years this past week?
I believe so. So it is one of those things where it's like, it's exciting stuff, you know, I still feel like there's still a lot of work to be done,
right?
But it's not looking like impossible. You know, we're not sitting here watching a million rematches. We're not sitting here watching these super extraordinarily goofy storylines. You know, I feel like things are definitely shaping up for the better.
So switching gears from WWE to AEW, you were dead center when all that media scrum craziness happened. CM Punk buried the EVPs, Hangman Page, Colt Cabana. Okay, so take us back. What was that atmosphere like? And did you anticipate it becoming as big as it is now?
Oh, God, no. Well, when I got there, I was just like, you know, when I get to these things, I'm in a very, very work mode. Like, my husband doesn't like to travel with me to these shows anymore because he's like, oh my God, like, you're so scary. He thinks I'm scary, like a scary woman when I'm just like busy working and I'm so, focused and this and that. And so I'm like, all right, whatever. Like, I need to get this done, like I'm very like focused, right? So when I get in there, I'm like, camera up, go to myself, like in my brain. And so I'm setting my stuff up. I'm trying to like think, okay, is the audio going to catch if I'm over here? Is my angle good? What is this going to look like if the wrestlers sit here, if the wrestlers sit there? It's a lot of technicality stuff that's going on in my mind, right? So I was really focused on that. When CM Punk walks in and I'm like, oh, CM Punk's starting. Okay, go, hit record. And I'm sitting there and, I've sat in so many of these CM Punk scrums before. I've sat in so many of these scrums before that I wasn't really expecting anything out of the ordinary. I thought, okay, it's going to be time for questions. Let's see what people are going to ask. I'll chill here, wait till, I'm inspired or something, whatever, right? Then, the whole thing started with Nick Hausman, where he kind of set up Nick Hausman to like start talking about Colt Cabana, right? And so it kind of started and I'm thinking like, where are we going with this? And I'm like, oh, okay. Once he started saying certain words, I thought, oh, he's like really going for it now. And it just got to the point where there was a certain moment where I just thought, lay low, just sit here, be a fly on the wall type of thing. And that's that. Like, that was my mentality. Just lay low, make sure you're recording, and hope to God that you're one of the first people to get this video up afterwards, because this is the video that is going to do very well for you. I remember thinking that. And I remember like tweeting. I couldn't even, usually I tweet like a play-by-play type of thing of these scrums. This one, I was so listening to what CM Punk was saying that I just tweeted out like, you guys are not going to want to miss this one. Like, this is going to be a very noteworthy media scrum. And, obviously there was the whole thing with the security guard running out. There was a lot of tension. Afterwards, everybody was just like, what the hell is going on type of deal. And I just remember making sure that I was, rushing to my hotel room to get that footage up.
And you got your footage up, and look what happened. Over 1 million views on YouTube. That is incredible. How was that for you, since you are a content creator, seeing that happen on your YouTube channel? That must have been pretty freaking cool.
It was really cool, because I know a lot of people are like, well, you didn't do any of the work, and I'm like, well, you're right in the sense that I pressed record and I sat there. Yeah, by all means, I just pressed record and I sat there. But I always think back to like, I wasn't the only person in that room. I wasn't the only person recording. I wasn't the only person, there was multiple people, and not everybody can say that their video hit 1 million views, but I can. And the reason for that is because of the reputation and track record that I had previously on the channel, that basically a lot of people knew for a while. Like, if you want to watch, decent quality of these scrums, go to Denise's channel. That's where you're going to get the non-cell phone footage. That's where you're going to get, the best audio, because I can't have like, microphones all up on them, because that's just not the setup for AEW.
Right. Yeah.
So it's the best that I can possibly get as a person just sitting there. So I was very, very proud of those numbers, and the fact that my video ended up being like the go-to video. That made me very happy, because I really needed that. I really needed like I guess you can say just a moment to make you feel like, you know what, you may be doing something right.
I'm just very curious. Do you think ultimately AEW will, I guess, recover from all of this? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I thought that the fallout was going to be worse, and I don't think it's been nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be. I wouldn't even say bad, actually. I think they did a pretty good job of that follow-up Dynamite, where they had Jon Moxley, do his thing, and MJF do his thing, and even the Tony Khan portion of that. I thought they did a fine job with like trying to move on as best as they could. I mean, like, man, that thing was a mess. Like, if you asked me, like, if I was Tony Khan and I had to figure out a way to make that stuff work the following week, I would be like, I would have aged like 40 years in 1 week, man. Seriously. So I think for the most part, it was like a really exciting, it was an exciting week. I will say an exciting week. Man, I'm such a big CM Punk fan, so this really sucks, because I don't want to see a world where we're not seeing CM Punk in wrestling. Like, we waited so long, and I don't feel that we got all that we wanted to get out of it. So I hope that, and I may be naive to say this, but I do hope that, all parties figure out their stuffs and, like people say, make money out of it.
I do want to commend you on your ability to maintain a positive outlook on wrestling, because as a content creator, we're always dealing with that temptation to want to, okay, what gets the view? What's going to get people to come see my channel more? But you have steadfastly remained positive about what you talk about. You remain real. You're always just looking at, okay, what can I talk about that's going to benefit wrestling? How do you maintain a level head when it comes to that kind of stuff?
I am very careful with a lot of especially when it comes to social media. You have to be really careful with what you tweet. Unfortunately, now, like, you can tweet anything and that'll get you heat. But I'm at the point now where I'm just like, I mean, as long as I'm not saying, oh, this person should, die or something, like, go out there and post your wrestling opinion. I don't care. Like, I don't care if people argue on my timeline about if a match sucked or if this wrestler sucks or not, if that promo sucked or not. I don't care. Like, that's something I've never cared about. And I see that people get triggered and, they'll fight back and be like, how dare you say this about this person? And I'm like, who cares? Let that person have their opinion. Like, when I go on my shows and I do my shows, I tell people, like, you don't have to agree with me. Like, it's fine. Like, it's entertainment. It's supposed to be subjective. You're supposed to have your own opinions to it. If I love something and Alyx, you were like, nah, Denise, I hate it, I'm like, all right, well, let's talk about it. This just got better, but I'm just not, I can't get angry about pro wrestling. I can't get angry about it. If we're talking about real life stuff, then I will get angry about it. But when it comes to wrestling, I feel like a lot of people lose sight of the fact that, why did we, when you ask yourself, why did I become a wrestling fan? Why? Because it's fun. It's fun. Like, I remember that being the reason why I became a fan, because it's fun. And that's what I try to present in everything that I do on my shows, on my Twitter account. That's why I do memes and giveaways and, stupid stuff like that may seem really highly dorky, but I do things that I would like. If I were following me, what would I want from this person? As a wrestling fan, what would I want from this person that I'm following? So I do that thing. Like, I do things that I know that I, as a fan, would like or relate to or think was fun or cool or whatever,
I think that is so cool. And I am someone that started YouTube. Like, I've been doing this for 10 years. So when I first started, it was nothing but rants. Wrestling sucks, WWE sucks, blah, 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 blah. But that's what got the views. So it's actually nice. It's a nice change of pace to see someone come in and be like, hey, man, it doesn't matter how you feel. Just talk about wrestling, because it's all about wrestling regardless. I love that.
Yeah.
We're going to have to wrap it up with this question here. When it's all said and done my deal, I'm going to call it a day. Denise Salcedo is calling it. What's one thing that you want people to remember you mostly for?
I want people to see me as a trailblazer.
Oh, okay.
There you go. A trailblazer and someone that was very smart when it came to how they handled their business.
Wow. So going back to Lita, she was a trailblazer. There you go.
She was. Hell yeah, she was.
That is so cool, Denise. Thank you so much for doing this interview with me. Please tell me where to follow you on your social medias.
Twitter and Instagram @ Denise Salcedo, youtube.com/Denise Salcedo.
Man, that was a great interview, wasn't it? Yeah, she is a bundle of joy. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. Please share your thoughts down below about what you heard. Maybe you have questions for her. Maybe she'll see them and respond. But regardless, do all the YouTube things. Like the video, subscribe, click that bell, catch all of my content when it comes out. Follow me on social media. Follow Denise on social media, and I'll catch you guys in my next interview. We have a lot more coming down the pike, so be sure you're subscribed and also get you a YouTube membership. Thank you guys so much for making me a part of your day, and always know you are welcomed right here in Alyx's world, a place that is, was, and forever will be a safe space for wrestling fans like you. Peace.